Hello again, beautiful people. This is a reminder this program is brought to you by GrenCHAP with funding from the Eastern Caribbean Allegiance for Diversity and Equality, Inc., ECAD, and the Commonwealth Equality Program and Kaleidoscope International Trust. I am your host, Lorna Dale Charles, and our guest speaker for today are Mrs. Brenda Lee James Johnson and Mr. Arthur Pear. Our topic for discussion is behind the scenes, victims blaming. Now, we all want to believe that the world is just and that bad things would happen to them or to us. Empathy sometimes can suffer. And that is a quote by Miss Kaylee Roberts. Now, as we talk about victim blaming, from my understanding, guys, victim blaming is the devaluing act that occurs when victim or a victim of a crime or an incident, an accident, is held responsible in part or sometimes in whole for the crimes or the act that has been committed against them. So as we get into our discussion, I first want you guys, and I have a two-part question for you. The first part, and I go with Mrs. Johnson James. Who is considered a victim and why do we blame victims?
So good afternoon again, Lorna Dale, and it's a pleasure to be here with you and to share the discussion with Arthur. The question, who is considered a victim and why are they blamed?
Right.
Who is considered a victim? Any individual who is the target of another person's violent, discriminatory, harassing, or accusatory behavior. Simply put, the victim is someone who has been wronged by a perpetrator.
Right.
And it could be anything, an act of sexual violence, any form of abuse, something as mundane as pickpocketing. Somebody being, their pocket was picked, they could be blamed for the reasons for why the act happened to them. So the person is the target of that kind of behavior.
Right.
So you wanted me to go on?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mr. Pear, we'll come to you just now. I want to hear your take on this. Continue, Mrs. Johnson James.
Oh, so in terms of you, the second part of the question was why? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why blame the victim? A few reasons. It may not be obvious actually, ignorance of what has happened, ignorance of the issue, meanness could be another reason. But as unbelievable as it may sound, another reason people blame victims would be to distance themselves from the unpleasant situation that has occurred, right? And in a way, to them, it confirms their own ability to be responsible and not to be at the same risk as the person who suffered, right? I know we're talking about victim, but it's so much, I have a little difficulty, we're talking about victim blaming, but I have a little difficulty constantly referring to people who are wronged as victims.
Victims,
for the purpose of the discussion.
I guess for the scope of the conversation, yes we would stick to that terminology. Mr. Pear.
Right. I do agree with all that Brenda Lee says, but one of the things that over the years that I've noticed when it comes to the issues of victim blaming, and I will look at the last issue first, the person on the outside who would blame the victim blamer, basically places his or herself in a position of, I am better than you. I would not make that decision. You are foolish to be doing that. And those are some of the things that you would hear coming from the mouth of persons who blame. that could never happen to me. So there is almost a them and us kind of demarcation. All right. And it basically in the eyes of the blamer, it is really and truly, look, you are foolish to be in that particular position. You are not knowledgeable enough why you are there. One of the things you see a lot of victim blaming is it has a lot to do with domestic violence. All right, how come you stay in there so long? You had to be stupid to actually be there. So there is that level of, that could not be me. All right, and again, it is sometimes almost a protective mechanism to make myself feel safe, and I think Brenda Lee alluded to that. To make me look safe, to make me look okay, to make me look good, to make me look like if I am on top of the world, and it does not happen to people like me.
So it's a sort of power dynamic as well.
Right. We see a lot of that too, for example, with persons who might be HIV positive. Okay. That would never happen to me. All right. And I think when actually persons, might be HIV positive and so, we look for things to say, okay, it is something that you must have done wrong to cause you to be in that particular position. And I would not do that. Whatever you would have done to cause you to be there, I would not do that.
And this is, if I may just add, this is where some of when you ask the question, why then why blame the victims, right? This is where the ignorance comes in. Some of the beliefs that we have surrounding certain issues. So, for instance, again, HIV and AIDS, the only way you can catch this, you can contract it rather, is by being unfaithful.
You're being promiscuous, yeah.
Right. Being promiscuous, right? Okay. In terms of if there's some sexual assault, you would hear the default of most people would be to question the victim. Where were you? What were you wearing? Who else was around? Why did you go there? When it was happening, did you scream? Who did you tell?
Right.
And I just wanted to add something that comes up in therapy a lot. There may be somebody who finally finds the courage to disclose that they were raped. And then the question would be, so how long ago was this? 2 years ago. 2 years? And you didn't tell anybody? Well, if you didn't tell anybody, it means that you liked it.
You somehow agreed.
Sent it in some way. And very rarely would you find those who would realize this is when the person who suffered that experience, that encounter, just found the voice and the courage to talk about it. And therein lies again one of the major consequences of victim blaming, because then it causes the person not to report, not to come forward and share, because I have had this experience, and now you're questioning my integrity and the sincerity of what has happened, rather than find help for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I had a discussion with someone today, and exactly what you say now, Mrs. Johnson James. That person is in their 40s, and what she's saying to me, it's like 32 years ago this has happened to me. And I didn't ask the question, why didn't you tell anyone? Because I suppose I understand, as a social scientist, you understand those types of situations. And she was like, I didn't have the network. If I did report it to my mother, those are the kind of questions that would have been asked, and I probably would have been blamed again for being in that space. And it's like, why didn't you say something? But even if you did say something, the mindset is do as I say, because that was a lot of talk at the time when she was growing up. She said, "Do as I say and not don't question me." So even she wants to
Yeah.
express when that has been repeated in her mind. Your mother tell you to do this, or your parents tell you to do this. Don't go to that particular person. I don't want to go. It's like, I am the mother. I'm sending you to that person, not understanding that person was being abused for years by the person who the mother who had trusted, but she didn't have the strength to articulate what had happened to her, and it became repetitive. So it was a continuous form of abuse for her, and there was nothing she could have done about it. And to this date, she has not spoken to anyone about it, but she did. I mean, today, as a matter of fact, today, as we having this conversation, and then she said that's like 32 years ago, and she's now talking to, I guess, me about it. So you're absolutely right when you said when these situations happen to persons, they need that safe space, and if they don't have that mechanism, that person who they can trust, or that safety space room they could go and talk to, then it sometimes take a little bit longer. So I suppose when persons are confiding us, we need to be mindful of all those things and not blame them for taking too long, or why didn't you say something? They're saying it now, it doesn't matter. And now is the appropriate time, because they have that strength that you spoke about, the courage to really open up that can of worms,
And
because you have to relive that experience as you're telling that story again. And most of the time that is difficult. So my next question, and I would start with you, Mr. Pear, what does victim blaming really looks like?
Wow. I would take that from the perspective of the issues of domestic violence,
Right.
where somebody would have gone through a traumatic experience, right? And they are giving them their encounter, the experience with somebody else. They are hurt, they are vulnerable, they feel abused, bruised, battered, and you have somebody coming and saying, look, this actually might be your fault.
Right.
Right? This is your fault. There is something that you must have done for this to actually happen to you. If you look at me, I would have not done something like that. I think it might have been, a bad decision that you would have made. The wrong type of clothes you would have had on. You did not fix your husband. You did not perform the duty of a wife. Okay. You could have avoided that. You understand? If you had just done what he said, you would not have had to go through this. Okay. That is basically some of the things that you would see with the issues of victim blaming. And I mean, just putting yourself in the picture of somebody like that, you make the person feel like they are nobody. All right? You are powerless.
Absolutely.
There is no hope in terms of, you feel hopeless. There is no hope in terms of you getting somebody to understand the pain that you're going through. All right? Basically, you are being taken advantage of. Again, you would have gone through a traumatic experience, and you exactly, that's the word. You are re-traumatized. You are abused again. All right, and that is, in my view, that is what victim blaming looks like.
Mrs. Johnson James.
Well, Arthur is correct, and to use his example, some people may go as far as saying to the victim, "You provoked him."
That's right.
Into the abuse, right?
Yes.
Well, he doesn't like when you talk to the other person, or he doesn't like when you dress that way, or she's jealous, because again here we need to continuously establish the abuse and the
Both
victim
sides.
blaming goes both ways, right? So if you provoked him, this is why he did it. This takes away from the perpetrator being held
Accountable.
Accountable. Absolutely.
for what he did. And again, just adding more weight to King Sugar. So here is somebody before you, maybe crying, or to use the example that you use, after 32 years. When that person finally finds a therapist, if they so desire, to go to get help, this person may very well relive this as though it just happened.
Yeah.
Because remember, most of the decisions from there on hinged on that experience that they have had.
Absolutely.
So victim blaming looks like once the person shares with you his or her experience and you start questioning it and questioning them rather than just being empathetic and listening to find out how you could help rather than why you allow this to happen or to identify ways to the person that they could have prevented this from happen. This is what victim blaming looks like.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things the only thing that I could have provided, as you said today, was empathy and just that listening ear, just being there, because I did not know what to say. But I think that is what they needed at that time. And then at the end of the conversation, it's like, thanks for listening and not blaming. Because the only thing I could have provided was empathy, a hug, and just be there. If you need to talk about anything else, you know how to find me. Be there. It doesn't have to be that particular situation again, because like you rightfully said, they are reliving that experience. Because I could have felt the emotions, the switch in the tone. That's not the person I knew all along before this story came up, and to find the coping mechanism and strategies of dealing with it, it takes a really strong person to do that. So in essence, that's what I would say. I think you're very strong because it takes so long to talk about it. The only thing I could give you is cheers, hip hip hooray, because you overcome this and now you're here, you're talking about it. And I asked, is this something that you would want to talk about in an open space at all the time? She said yes. And I think it's because I'm doing this other show, The Social Mind. She wants to come and share her story, but I guess you need to have that network. May not be a therapist, but that person probably who could encourage you to see a therapist, because I'm not trained to deal with that. So that was my recommendation. So you're absolutely right, Mrs. Johnson James. Now, over the years, particularly in our society, Caribbean societies, not just Grenada, we hear a lot, or we see a lot about blaming persons in society. And as you both alluded to, why did you wear that? Why he doesn't like this? She doesn't like that. And we take away the I suppose the faults of the person who perpetrated the crime and blame the person who experiences those crimes, right? And more so, it has become very prevalent on social media. Why do you guys think that is the case?
If I may, let me go before Miss John, because it's a question I saw and I pondered a lot about it.
Right.
One of the things that social media has provided is ambiguity. Right? You can stay in the background with a false name in some way or the other, and you can spew a lot of negativity.
Absolutely.
A lot of times we see things on videos and so happening to persons, and we are not there. We don't know the circumstances. We are seeing the issue from a particular point. We have not seen the beginning of the issue, and we cast judgments. Right? But it's a safe space for us. Just as when we talk about earlier on the issue of just the mere concept of victim blaming, the them versus us kind of story. Social media enhances that, in that they don't have to know me, they don't have to see me, all right? And I give my opinion based on the judgment that based on what I see, my perspective, based on what I see from whatever is there. And maybe I might take my cue from all the other comments that persons might be uttering. So it gives the blamer a kind of safe space to say even more. Now, if, for example, it's a situation where I could see Brenda Lee face to face, there are some things I may hold back because I am there, if you understand what I'm saying. But with social media, I could openly say anything and not be held accountable for it because I have the safety of ambiguity, of anonymity. All right? People don't know who I am. They don't know. I could say whatever, and they don't know who I am. I just wanted to say that. I think that is why social media sometimes people become bullies on social media. Because nobody knows me. I could, and when they see me, they will say, "Nah, man, he would never do something like that, or you'd never say something like that." But I'm hiding behind all of that, and I could do well and say what I want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So for me, while there is, more advocacy and more groups and so coming out and speaking out against victim blaming and things like that. Unfortunately, Lanadale, the media reflects the society that we function in. Yeah, and absolutely. Ours is a society of sensationalism. Somebody graduates from university, somebody, a young entrepreneur, somebody's launching their business, 3 people on the live. Right. Something sensational about somebody has gotten raped, was raped, 1 point something, right? So the media reflects the society and promotes that. Again, when we listen to reports about incidents of violence, sexual, physical, whatever, the language that is used, sometimes even the headlines, the language used from then throughout the piece of report blames the victim, right? So there might be some connections made. Mary is a known commercial sex worker. Mary was reported in the past for certain things. So when you put this out there, oh, well, she a custom man, right? And the blame falls on her again because the focus is now on her behavior rather than what happened to her, what was done to her. You see often in the media, almost weekly, lawyers speaking out on the news. Who do they speak up? Who do they speak up for? The perpetrators. Right? That's who they defend. They're mentally unstable, this or that, and they come up with the jargons to defend their clients, but their clients are the perpetrators. Meanwhile, the victims are there looking on and wonder, am I the one they're talking about? This was my actual experience. It happened to me. I'm not lying. Where is the support for me? Where is the consideration for me? And that's what social media does, or the media does. Again, we as women, we're the ones who the reports are made about generally, right? How often? And it happens, maybe not maybe, it doesn't happen as often as it does with men, right? But rarely, if at all, you hear any crime of a sexual nature or so perpetrated against a male being publicized like that.
I suppose they don't come out with it because, again, society deals with it in the opposite direction. Instead of probably holding the persons accountable, we empower that when it happens in the opposite direction. So you're absolutely right. We call him a stud boy, how you this and that, and we brag about it in essence when it happens in the opposite direction.
There are some men who would take that sort of abuse seriously. I could recall there was a case where this gentleman was, for want of a better word, raped by two women, right, or sexually abused by two women, and he brought it to court. Brought it to the police and eventually brought it to court, and they had a field day on him and say, well, why don't he, take that and cool it? He should be happy that he have two women who, wanted him and all of that, and sometimes men are blamed as victims simply because they are men, right? And you have men who just basically don't like that. They don't want to be categorized in that particular way. And when they do things, they get the wrath sometimes of the entire society coming down on them and saying that they're not real men, because real men would never do things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we expect our men to be powerful, and we want them to do everything else, but they're not knowing that it's also messing with their mojo when we react to certain things that affects and impact them. So it takes us to our next question. What is the psychology then behind blaming the victims?
It's interestingly, the blaming serves to create a sort of psychological distance. And I think Arthur spoke about it briefly earlier on. It's sort of like a distance between the blamer and the victim. So it's like, I'm blaming you. In some sort of way, I feel as though I am more responsible. So it didn't happen to me because I am more responsible than you. I don't dress that way. I do not choose to go these places. I do not choose to be I chose another profession. I am not a commercial sex worker, right? So it's like, look at me, right? So it's a sort of protective, coping mechanism that is used by the blamer.
Also, the psychology of the whole thing takes away empathy. It subtracts empathy for the person who actually goes through that. And I want to just add to what Brenda Lee just said. It places me better than in a better. I feel that I'm better than you are. All right. If you made that choice, that is basically consequences that would follow you. Yeah. I don't make that kind of choice because I'm better. All right. I have more sense. I am more knowledgeable. I am a better person than you are. Right. And that is basically sometimes what actually happens there. The empathy on not placing yourself in that person's position, in the victim's position, and putting themselves outside of it to feel safe and to feel like if they are in a better position than the victim.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think that's a very a hypocritical way of dealing with things, because you just could be walking down the road and somebody just take you in their car. You could simply get a ride from a friend, a trusted friend.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you went out of your way or you was doing anything wrong. You were going about your business and they made an offer. So sometimes I think we need to be more critical and analytical when we are speaking about some of those social ills, and understand that it can happen to anyone.
Anybody.
It can happen to anyone. You don't have to put yourself in a particular position or situation, and you wear clothes that I suppose you're comfortable with. So because I'm wearing a particular outfit doesn't mean that I'm asking for anything, for any particular thing. I'm asking to be raped. I'm asking to be abused, right? So I think sometimes, as persons, sometimes we say society, but we are society. We are the
That's right.
ones that
That's
makes
right.
up society.
Exactly.
So we are the ones that have to be realistic. We have to be empathetic towards one another and understanding that nobody's going to put themselves in a position of to be abused in the true sense of the word. Yeah,
Lonadale,
Brenda Lee?
sorry, I just wanted to add, you said hypocritical, right?
Right.
And we're talking about the psychology of victim blaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, to accept walking where I think the whole psychology about victim blaming too is there's this theory that the world is fair, right? And so if the world is fair, what I would just be able to live freely, and if I am responsible and I do what I have to do, these things would not befall me. Now imagine I have to think Mary the neighbor was raped.
Right.
And I have to start to think now, wow, you mean that's my neighbor? So it could be me next. This could happen to me. I am
That's where
exposed
empathy
to that
comes in.
level of danger. So there is anxiety, there is fear, right? And this is the part of the psychology of victim blaming. If I think that if she acted more responsibly, if she dressed better, and if I do these things, that wouldn't happen to me. So yes, it could appear hypocritical, but remember, it serves a purpose.
A purpose?
It's a sort of protective coping mechanism.
It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So then, well, we know that victim blaming is dangerous.
Yes.
Particularly for the person who experienced those sometimes hideous crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the consequences to the victim, their families, and their friends then?
Yeah, well, as we spoke about earlier on, especially for the victim,
right,
it silences a person. So they will not speak up. When you do not speak up, and that individual has to deal with this, internalizes the experience, leads to anxiety, and we know mental health issues and these things are on a continuum.
Right.
Graduates now to depression, may even lead to, depending on how it's managed or not managed, promiscuous behaviors. You spoke about the person in your example, and while you were talking, one of the things that came to my mind is a lot of the times when people experience these things, especially children, it's almost always somebody who is familiar.
And that was
imagine
familiar.
This familiar person might be a husband, a stepfather, a pastor, somebody whom the family holds in high regard.
Esteem. Mm-hmm.
Right? And you're not believing that Arthur Pierre,
they would do
Arthur is
such
an
a thing.
advocate. He would not do that. Back again, victim blaming, right? So it silences the person and the anxiety, increasing in anxiety, and as I said, shame. Because the individual has to deal with this.
Yeah.
This has happened to me, and whether or not they told somebody, they could feel the shame for themselves, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. It has been there for 32 years. It has not been dealt with. But it has been impacting this person, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a host of other things that could go wrong. And back to last week's discussion, dysfunction in the family, conflict in the family, aggression. And then you hear people say, but I don't know, she just changed, or he just changed, and they're so aggressive, and they're just behaving so for no reason.
There is a reason. There's a root cause. There's always a root cause.
Dysfunctional behavior for no reason.
There's always a root cause.
Just one other thing. It almost creates a bondage of fear
Yeah.
for the individual. That individual is unable to function normally. If it is a situation of rape, that person don't want to go anywhere. The person might, want to stay locked home at all time. If it's a situation where it is done by a family member, there is that sort of antisocial behavior that you can see coming from the person. They don't want to mix and mingle with the individual. I can remember there was a lady that told me when she was pretty young. She was actually raped by one of her mother's friend, and the mother used to have to send her there all the time to get this or get that because it was a close family friend, and she used to be in a fit. Actually, there were some psychosomatic illnesses that began to manifest in her simply because every time the mother has to come home and she knows that the mother is going to send her, she became, physically unwell. All right. So you have that sort of fear eating on persons, and they cannot live freely. They cannot function freely, and along with the host of things that Brenda Lee just spoke about. That is no way for any individual to live, and certainly it will create problems, both psychologically and physically, for that individual going forward.
Absolutely. And another thing that sometimes we see coming out, sometimes we wonder why persons are abusive, both male and female. And sometimes that their way of acting out or dealing with it, because at the time they're going through that particular thing and you kind of grow into it. So you become probably verbally abusive or physically abusive. So sometimes, like I said, there must be a root cause. Sometimes when men or women behave in particular ways, there is something that is happening. So I guess as society, we need to be mindful of that and stop, blaming the victims. So how do we then respond to victim blamers, or should we even respond at all? How can we?
Well, we need to respond because remember, the victims are people, and just having the experience alone to deal with that is traumatic, as we said, and to have to suffer alone, not having support readily available or questioning if you would get support. So we must talk about it. We need to challenge the victim blaming attitude and the statements that are made. So some people say things and jokingly, we need to call them out on it. Whenever we see it, we call it by name. Absolutely. We speak up and we speak out against it. We hold the abusers, the perpetrators, accountable for their action, right? Mm-hmm. And so when people start to come up with things like, well, he was drunk or he was upset, making the excuses, we have to hold them accountable for their behavior, for their action. We have to constantly validate the stories that the victims say to us. We're not judge, we're not jury, we're not in court. Right. This is the storyteller, and I just have to listen and accept the story as you have shared it with me.
Their perspective, yes.
Their experiences.
Right? Mm-hmm. Not questioning them and validating their courage to speak out.
Absolutely.
And, you said you did not know what to say. And sometimes you don't need to say anything. Just a listening.
Just listen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just a listening ear. The power of silence. Silence means a lot of things. It means support. It means that you're with me. It could mean that, wow, this is the first time nobody ever judged me and blamed me, right? And sometimes people get very uncomfortable with silence.
Yeah.
But we also have to...
But silence is always golden. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And we need to educate the victims. that regardless of what you were wearing, where you went, the profession you've chosen, you are not responsible for another person's
Other person's
decision
actions.
and another person's action or behavior, right? And just simply let the survivors know it's not your fault.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Perry, want to add anything?
Yeah, I think Brenda Lee stated all the things that I would have stated. When it comes to the victim blamers, because I've sat down among men who are perpetrators of domestic violence, and when they give their story, some of the other guys would say, yeah, if some of these women would understand this, or if they did that, and you had to call them out and say, hello, they are individuals at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Right, and you what your actions you cannot change. The only person that you can change is yourself. And sometimes we are powerless to change some of our own behavior.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to call them out. You have to call them out. You also have to begin to instill the issues of empathy. If it were you, would you have liked to be treated like that? Would you have liked somebody to take a piece of 2x4 and slap you across the face with it? How would you have felt? So you have to sort of bring it home to them. At the end of the day, too, we also have to let persons know that they need to respect themselves and respect other persons as individuals. Okay, and understand that there are some things that nobody should be going through. Nobody should have to feel that they are abused and misused and treated in a way that is demeaning. All right, so we have to call them out, and again, rightly to what we said about the victim, we have to let persons know that it is not your fault. If you are going through this, if this has happened to you, you didn't cause this on yourself. All right, regardless of what you would have done. This is not it's somebody who decided to do this particular thing to you and to cause the pain that you're going through. All right. So that's basically what I would say about that. But generally, our society sometimes could be so very cruel when it comes to persons who go through a lot of the issues that they go through. Because of our culture, because of how we are socialized, we have to begin to change that sort of narrative through education. All right, because we have a lot of persons who are really, really and truly hurting, and sometimes, when they talk about, we jokingly say things, not understanding that it sometimes could be very, very deep and very, very, deep cutting for individuals who are going through pain. All right. And our society seems to have the ability to laugh everything off when we are going through a lot of pain. But it might be a coping mechanism, but it sometimes spells real danger for the person who is the victim. And we have to begin to change that sort of mindset to be able to have a society where we show a little bit more love, a little bit more care, and a little bit more empathy for persons.
A lot more empathy. A lot more empathy. I would say.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I think I'll make this a two-part question again. How can both male and female, men and women, combat victim blaming, and how can we hold each other accountable? As we wrap up.
Well, I think.
Yeah,
let me go first, and you.
No problem.
Wrap up. Okay.
Right. How can we hold both men and women? How can we hold each other accountable? It has a lot to do with one. I always believe in introspection, looking at yourself first. Do the introspection, right? And then in your introspection, understand that there are some things that you would not like happen to you. And when you do that, look at the other person with the same eyes that you look at yourself, with the same view that you look at yourself, and see that person is an individual just like you. Okay? in terms of relationships where you have issues with men and women, sometimes issues of domestic violence, and even, may not be physical violence, but just respecting each other as individuals. What you would want to see happen to yourself, certainly you would not want to see that happen to the other person. And if that person is going through a period, a hurt, or they are going through, they are a victim, you have to understand that if you are going through the same thing, you wouldn't want persons to come and say, well, it was your fault. You are the ones that, you're the one that caused this, that, or the other. All right? Or you had some part in to play in terms of what actually happened to you. So when you do that and you could elicit that empathy, I believe that we can hold each other accountable. Again, we have to call the issues out. When those issues raise their head, we have to be able to call it out and say, look, this is not the way that we should go, because it's an individual I'm dealing with. Again, do that introspection and be able to have the desire to treat the other person the way that you like to be treated.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And to re-emphasize some of the things that we said earlier in terms of how to combat victim blaming, listen. That's the one rule. On social media, they talk about understanding the assignment. The one assignment you have is just to listen. And if you don't know how to deal with it, maybe just ask, how can I help you? And the person may just say, well, I just needed you to listen. Or they may ask, because I'm a victim, it doesn't mean I don't have resources and I don't know, I can figure out some things. Or may ask, do you know of a therapist? Do you know where I can go and get help? Or I just wanted you to listen.
Yeah.
Education again. Educate people about, some people are not aware that they're
Victim blamers.
in victim blaming.
Oh, sure.
Again, confront, speak up, speak out. Those of us who know it, we can identify it. When we see it happening, we speak up and we speak out. In terms of holding each other accountable, first of all, there must be awareness. Everything begins with awareness. Because if I don't know I'm doing it, and if I just see it as a joke,
right,
I will continue to do it. So there must be, some level of awareness. And acknowledge it when it's done. When it's brought to my attention or the individual's attention that you're doing this, be man or woman enough to acknowledge, oh, well, I was not aware that this would have that impact, or this is what victim blaming is. And so, okay, I know how to, stop that behavior and do otherwise the next time. Avoid the accusatory questions.
yeah,
Somebody shared a story. Stop being a journalist. Why, where, how? You understand? Just listen. This is the person's story that they're sharing. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, deal with your uncomfortable feelings, because sometimes that's what happens. That's what contributes to people saying some of the things that they say. And again, the language surrounding survivors, the language that the media would use, or the language that people would use when describing what has happened. The girl down there, she does always be by the road, dressing slack, always in some party, naked, half naked. We have to reframe our speech and do unto others as we would want happen to us. Because any one of us could fall victim to any act, whether it's an actual rape or of any other form of violence, or even what we have had emerging recently, the leaking of sex videos. And people are saying, why they do that? Why? It could happen to anybody at any point in time. Let's just be kind to each other. Let's just support our fellow human being.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess you guys wrapped it up really, really nicely. So we need to hold ourselves accountable because we are sometimes we participate in that. We need to show empathy. We need to understand, I guess, put ourselves in the other person's shoes, as you said. The golden rule: do unto others as you like them to do unto you. So you know for a fact if you don't like X, Y be done to you, you would not be comfortable if that same thing happened to you. So show each other empathy. Stop blaming victims for things that are out of their control most of the time. And let us, I suppose, when there is a case of, let's say, domestic violence or rape, one of the things that I would like to see is that some real serious policies go into that, and the law really dealing with those issues. And one of the things that was mentioned, sometimes we partake in it innocently because we joke. We say things jokingly, particularly in the context of our Grenadian society. We may kind of take everything for fun. We call people nicknames based on how they look. They might have a physical disability, for example, and we might call them hop and drop. So it has become part of our cultural dissemination. So we need to sometimes unlearn what we'd have learned culturally and understand that it does have some of our actions, and some of them inaction does have some psychological and social impact on our fellow
Absolutely.
our fellow citizens. So thank you guys so much. I think this is a very informative conversation. Remember, guys, we are talking about behind the scenes victim blaming. This program was brought to you by GrenCHAP with funding from the Eastern Caribbean Allegiance for Diversity and Equality. Sorry, that's ECAD, and the Commonwealth Equality Program and the Kaleidoscope International Trust. Thank you so much, guys, for being some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guests, as per usual. I suppose I'll see you guys soon again.
Hopefully.
All right.
Yes, let's look to our people and raise awareness about things that happen to us.
Absolutely. So I am your host, Lorna Charles. Thank you.
Ciao.